and financial information. So I know that's typically information that people do not want to share, or at least are not as open to sharing. So I just tried to kind of break it down and explain why they are asking for that information. For this social security number, they're asking for that for your FSA ID, because the FSA ID is pretty much your electronic signature for the FAFSA. So they use your social security number just to make sure that you are who you say you are. And then for the income taxes, I would just let them know sharing that information isn't going to do anything or impact you negatively in any way. It's not there to judge you or what it is you're making or whatnot. It's just there to help you and for financial aid offices to know how much they can give your student.
So there's some misconceptions that are around this, you know, that kind of delay the process. And as Stephen just said, you need to complete this process as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Stephen brought it up a little bit. I think one of the big misconceptions around the FAFSA is that whatever you receive in financial aid or whatever they offer you, like the loans, for instance, I think people think you have to take those. You have to put them into place when you're going to school. That is not the case. They're just offering it to you to let you know that you do have options to bring those costs of attendance down.
Okay, that's great. So once again, to reiterate, it's giving me an estimate of what aid I'm going to receive and also the cost of attendance, but I'm not signing, you know, anything by just completing the application and having it sent to the schools that it applied to.
Yes, exactly. You typically, they'll give you a deadline for when you can receive the financial aid or say what financial aid you want to receive. So typically in your student's portal for the school they're attending, there'll be information on financial aid, and it'll have all of the financial aid awards they've been offered, and then you get to pick and choose which awards you're going to accept or not.
Okay, that's great. And Claire, I was actually reading an article this morning, trying to get ready for this webinar, you know, stay up to date on all the FAFSA changes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the top myths is that families sometimes assume that they make too much money to qualify for aid, so they actually don't even apply.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that myth.
Well, I think, like I said, I think people just have so many misconceptions around what the FAFSA is. And I think nobody wants to be judged on what it is that they're making or what they aren't making. So I think that might be one of the reasons why, but yeah, I don't know. I think the FAFSA is not as scary as it seems to be. And I think people just need to fill it out just to see what they can get. Because I'm sure there are plenty of students of mine who didn't file it last year who would have been Pell eligible. So I think you should just give it a try. You might get a bunch of free money.
All right. And I couldn't agree more, Claire. Talk to me a little bit, because there's a lot of language that goes around this application.
Mm-hmm.
As I talked to Stephen, you know, he talked about the EFC, the expected family contribution. You just found another thing, and I actually did, and I didn't explain it, but maybe you could do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
Pell Grant. What is a Pell Grant that may show up on my financial aid award letter?
Yeah.
That gives me free aid.
Yeah, so the Pell Grant is a federal grant for students who are low income or financial need-based students. And I'm pretty sure the maximum amount a student can receive is $6,345. I'm pretty sure I just presented that on this morning, so hopefully those numbers are right. But that's the maximum amount. And typically students, the minimum they receive is $6,045 their first year. And then each year a student is eligible for the Pell Grant, that number goes up. But in order to receive the Pell Grant, you have to file the FAFSA, and you have to file it. I'm pretty sure typically the priority deadline is when you want to file that by, so March 1st.
March 1st. Okay. And is that one of those things that Stephen alluded to that is first come, first serve? So the importance of getting this application completed as close to tomorrow as possible?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And one more question, Claire, before I let you off the hook here,
Yeah.
before we go to Seth. The FSAID, did I say it
Mhm.
correctly? Talk to me a little bit about that. Is it students and families?
Yes, so both the student and only one parent. So if you come from a two-parent household, only one of your parents needs to create an FSA ID. But both student and parent will need to create one because they're just trying to match up the incomes with the families. So they want to make sure, like I said, that the people are who they say they are.
And my mistake too, there
Mhm.
are several grants that are first come, first served. Pell Grant is more need based.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's more based on the information that you provide during the application.
Hmm.
Okay, very good. Well, Claire, thank you so much. As much as the information for the, you'll see out there, do this, and take these steps to complete the application.
Hmm.
Some of the misconceptions and myths that are out there that prevent people from completing this application, knowing those ahead of time, really helps students and families, doesn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's good. All right, Claire, we'll let you off the hook for a little bit here and we'll come back to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Seth Cunningham. Seth comes to us from Frederick Douglass High School last year for his first year of service, and then joined us at Algonac High School. Seth, how you doing this evening?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us in St. Clair County. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. Well, Seth, I know you had a successful year last year too with FAFSA completions, and as I said, I'm glad that we hate to steal you away from Frederick Douglass, but talk to us a little bit about your experiences trying to get this application completed and getting it completed for your students.
Yeah, like Claire was expanding on, I think the biggest problem mostly is just everyone's misconceptions about the FAFSA. And I think the most important part is just, at least in our role, is to educate people on what exactly it is and what it's not, and all the things people think it is. Um, I think, like Claire was talking about too, just educating the family too, because obviously, as she said, you need a parent to do it with you. So if your parent doesn't understand the process either, it's really important to educate them on what it is.
Okay. And so what were some of the, Claire talked about some misconceptions, but at times it's a two parties that, need to get this done. And did you ever have a student that had a unique circumstance that was trying to complete the application and needed their family's information? How did you help students like that complete this application?
Yeah, that was definitely a pretty common thing last year, actually. One in particular that comes to mind is I had a student who always really wanted to go to college, but he would be first generation and he lived only with his mother. And she had a lot of misconceptions about FAFSA and college in general. He was trying for months before I started to get her just educated on the process so he could get it done as soon as he could. And he came to my office one day and he was just telling me all his frustrations about it. And ultimately, what we had to do is I started calling his mom and just told her what it is and what it's not, so she wasn't confused. And at first, she was very standoffish, obviously, because she believed what she believed for so long. But then just keep talking to them about it. And if you do have a parent or parents that aren't being the most helpful in the situation, I would suggest trying to get the most information from your college advisor or counselor as you can, just so you can at least get started with the FAFSA.
Okay. So it's not in much as, talking about these misconceptions and making sure that, we know that the importance of this application. When you come into a roadblock, so to speak, with, accessing certain information, getting tax returns, getting one parent to provide their information or maybe their FSAID, And just to, you said that's really important to work with your counselor and your college advisor. So is this something that students come to you on a daily basis with?
Oh yeah, last year they did all the time. I'm sure they will this year too. But like I said, if there's ever roadblocks along the way, don't ever be afraid to ask your counselor or us. That's what we're there for. So.
Okay. So it's kind of a fluid situation. You know, it's not going to be something that I can click on at midnight, hit a couple buttons and hit submit, correct?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important too just to make sure students don't think it's too intimidating, just because it's obviously an important thing to do. And it does take time, but it's not like it's something that is impossible to do like a lot of people think, especially if you have an advisor in your school that is specifically there to help you with it.
And we're fortunate to have 5 in St. Clair County. And then not only do we have U5 advisors, we also have very strong counselors
Right.
at high school. So, and actually, and I haven't submitted a FAFSA for years, but they say now it's the most streamlined process that it's ever been. And there's actually even an app that students and families can download.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they also have, because the toughest part for students and their families a lot of time is the financial aspect of it, which makes sense. But they also added a tool within the past few years that will extract some tax data out for you, so you don't have to manually enter it in, which has helped a lot.
At the IRS data retrieval tool.
Yep.
Okay, and is that, do you know much about that, Seth? What is that? Because that was just added recently.
Yeah, so it's literally just a button. Honestly, you just enter in, I think it's your social security number and your name, maybe a couple other questions, and it'll actually extract the data out of your tax returns for the previous year, which you need for the FAFSA. So then you don't have to manually look through your taxes. It'll all put it in the FAFSA application for you.
That's great. Any other advice, Seth, or any other thing, why it's important for this application that you want to leave the students and families with before we move on to our next presenter?
Like Stephen and Claire highlighted on, I think a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot that they could get from it. You might be eligible for something that you didn't even know you were eligible for, like a grant or the Pell Grant, like Claire was talking about, and you could get free money that you don't have to pay back. So even if you don't think that it is something that would help you out, I always suggest just doing it anyway, because you never know.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Seth. We're going to move on to the next presenter, and we'll come back to you during the question and answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Our next presenter is Jo Kassar. She is the Director of Financial Services. Before I let Jo start talking, I always like to do a little bit of bragging, because Jo is my go-to for financial aid questions. I think Jo, I owe Jo big time, because I usually reach out to her almost daily with a question about FAFSA. Jo actually last year was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Michigan Student Aid Association. She's only the 14th person among colleges and universities here in Michigan that received this prestigious award since 1985. So thanks again, Jo, for joining us. We know they are busy right now with everything that's happening in higher ed. But I also want to say thank you, because not only are you here tonight, you're here for all of the college advisors, but you're also here for all students that go to college, regardless if they're going to go to SC4 or not.
Thank you. Joy to be here.
Well, good. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you a little bit more questions about our current times and this FAFSA, and why it's always been important for students and families as they do their current college goals. But I also know that right now in our current times, for college access and attainment, and since the start of this global pandemic, the importance has definitely increased. Why is that?
So I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I must say that this year was the first time in my career that we saw some federal grants come up very rapidly due to the pandemic. So one of those is the CARES grant, and the CARES grant was came out of the Higher Ed Emergency Relief Fund Act that was put in place back in March. What the CARES Act allowed us to do was to help students who had some additional financial burdens or barriers, right, as a result of the pandemic. So we saw in March where a lot of colleges, and not just colleges, but K-12 students were moving back home, classes went remote, etc., and it just flipped everybody's world. Well, with the CARES Act, so it was money that was made available to students that was strictly to go into the hands of students. So it could not be used for tuition. So I could get money into the hands of my students for things such as technology or internet expenses and the other living expenses. But they needed to meet certain guidelines, not guidelines, they needed to meet certain restrictions and eligibility requirements that the Department of Education put forth for us. So one of those is that they needed to be Title IV eligible. So you say, what is Title IV? Well, that's the umbrella for all of the federal programs and the different grant programs that the college advisors have been talking about. So in order to be eligible for most of the federal programs that they talked about, as well as CARES, students need to be a US citizen or a permanent resident. They need to not be in default on a student loan. They need to be making academic progress at the college or university that they are attending. If they're a gentleman, they need to have registered with the Selective Service. So imagine all the colleges throughout the entire country and all the thousands of students that we're talking about. And those are just some of the eligibility requirements for Title IV. I didn't go through all of them. How difficult would that be to verify each one of those individually? So when students complete the FAFSA form, all of those edit checks are happening behind the scenes. So the Department of Education will run it through the central processing system, and they are checking with the Social Security Administration, with the Selective Service, with the Department of Homeland Security to make sure we are who we say we are on our application. So when it comes back clean, then I could very easily say, okay, I'm awarding the student the money. But if I didn't, and we're still working with students who, for the fall semester, I still have some money available, for example, where if they didn't complete a FAFSA form, but I have a CARES application, I can't give them any money, right? So then I'm having to delay and say, complete your FAFSA form. And then if I still have money left when I get it back, then I can give you money. But if that money is gone, then you're out those funds.
Okay. So thank you so much. And it really shows the importance right now, how not only how is this going to give us an estimate of the cost of attendance when we're looking at what colleges to attend, but then all the programs and initiatives and money that's actually attached to this after I complete it as I transition into my secondary plans. And you touched about something that's really particular is the things that are associated with it. It has to be completed. And I believe there was recently an announcement from the Tuition Incentive Program, otherwise known as TIP, that has an application, but now they're defaulting to, is it just FAFSA?
There is talk. There was a meeting today. I haven't heard the final outcome of that.
Okay.
So for our students who we think are TIP eligible, TIP stands for Tuition Incentive Program, and that is a state program here in Michigan. In order to be eligible, students need to have been on Medicaid for 24 months out of a consecutive 36-month period. If they are TIP eligible, they qualify for up to 80 credit hours of tuition assistance and mandatory fees. So if they're pursuing a certificate or an associate degree. So that's a lot of money, and that adds up. So we were fortunate last year because typically the students have to apply by August 31st of their senior year. Due to the pandemic, the state pushed back that allowance for a year, but we've been working very hard with the state to say, look, do they really need to fill out the TIP application, or can we strictly go with the FAFSA? So that, like I said, there was a call earlier today I have not received an email yet regarding the final outcome, but we're trying to make things easier. But TIP isn't the only state program. And there, you know, as we heard, can't remember if it was Stephen who talked about the state programs and that March 1st deadline date. We have the Michigan Competitive Scholarship. We have the Michigan Tuition Grant based on the different colleges or universities that our students may be attending. But I also have scholarship donors and foundations that are going to look at the information on the FAFSA form and did the student complete it. You know, in St. Clair County, we're very fortunate to have a program called the Complete Your Degree Program. So for students who have some hardship, et cetera, they can apply for that through the Community Foundation. Here again, they require that the student complete the FAFSA form. We know that Governor Whitmer, due to the pandemic, now this won't help this year's seniors, but if there are students on the call or parents on the call who have older siblings who may have been working in an essential industry during the pandemic, they qualify for Futures for Frontliners program. And that's a last dollar program where it will help pay for an associate degree or a certificate program. So here again, the FAFSA is required. So we're seeing state and federal programs that are requiring FAFSA, and they're there offering money to assist students who are eligible for the aid, but they do need to complete that application.
So basically, to summarize, and everything leads back to the completion of this application, regardless for a high school senior and then for the years to come.
Correct. It's a single year application. So students need to get in their mind, they need to complete it each and every academic year. So
Okay.
the form becomes available October 1st. So do you need to fill it out on October 1st? No. But the sooner you fill it out, the better off you are. You know, you definitely, if you're eligible for state aid, you want it there by March 1st. If you are, students need to be looking at the deadline dates based on the college or university that they are attending, because the institution might have some earlier deadline dates, or maybe they're a little bit later, but you don't know unless you research it. And as Seth told us, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So it's free. It's not costing me anything. It's an application where I'm asking others to help pay for my college education. Okay, so why would I not take advantage of that, right? They have resources at the high schools. They can call any financial aid office, whether the student is attending my institution or not. We will assist them with completing the application. You will notice that most of the colleges and universities, I want to say in the country, but I know some are working remotely, but definitely in the state of Michigan. Some of us are on campus, but most of us are still doing some remote advising, right? So you could get assistance for help in completing the FAFSA form. We will do phone appointments. We will meet with students via Teams meeting. So we're trying to assist in getting as many applications completed as we possibly can.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. That is some really good insight from the college perspective of what happened and why this application needs to be completed by the students and their families. I had a couple more questions, you know, to tee up here, but the chat's starting to light up now. And there's some better questions, you know, the audience can ask better questions than I can. So I'm going to throw it over to my partner, Rachel Verche, and she's going to she's been monitoring the chat. So Rachel, if you want to go ahead and ask some questions, you might as well ask with Joe, because Joe's unmuted right now and she's ready to go.
All right.
Okay, Joe. Hi. So we have a couple of questions that apply to divorced families. So
Okay.
the first question was asking for some clarification about the FSA ID for divorced families. How does that work in that situation?
Okay, so the student needs to have two FSA IDs. One is in the student's name and one is for the parent. All right, the FSA is an electronic legal signature. So the parent that the student lives with or lived with most in the most recent 12-month period is the person whose information needs to be on the FAFSA form. And they are the one who needs to have an well, that parent or that parent unit is the one who has to have the FSA ID. So for example, parents are divorced, John lives with mom. Mom is not remarried, mom would have the FSA ID, okay? And it would be her income information on the FAFSA form as long as she's not living with John's father. Let's say mom remarried, it would be mom and stepfather's income information on the student's FAFSA form, but only one of those parties needs to have an FSA ID.
So in the event that it's a 50-50, that the child lives equally with each parent, how would you handle that? This is a question, a follow-up question.
Yeah, I get this question every night, so I'm used to it. So somewhere along the line, somebody paid a little bit more than 50%, right? So you have to look at housing, transportation, insurance, clothing, food, whatever. It's not necessarily who claimed the student on their tax return, because that can alternate year by year, but it is somebody somewhere paid a little bit more than 50%.
All right. So another question to follow up with, if you're a divorced family and your child lives with one parent 100% of the time, do you need to include the other parent's financial information on your FAFSA application?
As long as the two parents do not live together, no. So it's not required on the FAFSA form. So because, and I word it that way because we do have some parents who are divorced but still live together. So tonight we're talking about the FAFSA form, but there are some colleges who also require a different application called the CSS profile. And if the student is completing a CSS profile, they may be asked to report that information on there. But for the FAFSA form, no, we do not.
Okay, and so another question that came in is about how long does it take to fill out the FAFSA?
Okay, quite honestly, it's not very difficult. It's a lot easier than a tax return. So for everybody out there who says, I don't even do my own taxes, I want to pay somebody to do this. No, you're not going to pay anybody to do it. So it's broken down into several different sections. I tell my students all the time, the first section, I don't even know the answers to it. It's name, address, social security number, date of birth, what high school did you go to, parents' level of education, very simple, right? I would say that then it'll ask the series of dependency questions. What school do you want it sent to before it gets into the income section and asset section? I would say if like we heard from one of our advisors earlier this evening, I don't know who, if we can use the data retrieval tool, it's very easy because you're going to basically give the Department of Education permission to go to the IRS and take your income information. In this case, it would be for the 2019 calendar year, and the IRS will dump it into your FAFSA form. Sometimes that works for families, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. But if you have your tax return handy, right, it will tell you exactly what line item to look for on your FAFSA form, or I'm sorry, on the tax return. So if you're organized, I would say you could easily do it in under an hour. Advisors, yay or nay? Yay, yeah.
A lot of thumbs up. All right. So the questions are rolling in now. Another question that was asked, there was another clarification question, so I'm going to skip to that one. So the student fills out the FAFSA and puts down the parent's financial information or their own finances.
Actually, they're putting both. So the finance section is in two parts. So student section is going to be, what was the student's 2019 income? Did they file a tax return? If not, we mark that they didn't. but did they work? Was there any other untaxed income? And then the asset questions for the students are very similar, exactly the same for both student and parent, but it's going to say, what is the value of your cash savings and checking account? Do you own a business or a farm? And what other real estate or investments do you have? So that is the student section. And then under the parent financial section, it's the exact same thing. Did you file a tax return in 2019? If so, what was your adjusted gross income, income earned from work, taxes paid, etc.? And then the same asset questions, but now looking at the parents' assets. Parents, do not include the value of your home, do not include the value of your retirement accounts. And it takes you through all of that, but you're getting financial information for both student and parent.
Great. And so there was another question, just to clarify, the parent creates the FAFSA ID for themselves and it is somehow linked to the child's FAFSA account. How does that connect?
Okay, so the FAFSA application itself is going to be in the student's name, but then the student will have their own FSA ID. And then when it comes time to sign it, it's going to say, what is your parent's FSA ID? So if they have not yet created one, they can do so right there. So, and it'll take them to a different link where they create it and it comes back, or else parents and students can create those FSA IDs ahead of time by going to fsaid.gov and have that. So then when it comes time to electronically sign it, you're entering your ID and your password and it recognizes who you are.
All right, so I know another question came in regarding assets and income, and I'm hoping that the person, I thought it sounded like Joe answered that in that last bit. If not, please restate your question or any follow-up you need. I think at this point we could go to Claire with another question. Claire, what if you haven't narrowed down your #1 school? How do you determine what school to put down?
Yeah, so I mean, I would, if you don't know what your #1 school is, then you have the option to put in all schools you plan on applying to or have applied to into the FAFSA. The thing is, when you do make that decision on what school you would like to attend, just make sure you go back into the FAFSA and put that school as your first choice, because then your FAFSA will be sent to that #1 school. Yeah, Joe, do you have more?
Sorry about that. And as Claire said, so the student can list up to 10 different schools on the FAFSA form, but the state of Michigan is going to assume the first college that is listed. So if they are looking for state aid, you want to move the order of that. But in the meantime, everybody will give an award letter, but the state of Michigan is going to focus on that first Michigan school only.
Great, I think we're caught up on the questions from the chat box. Nick, if you want to continue.
All right. Yeah, it looks like we just had one more come in there. That's all right. I'll flow with it before I have one more question here. Is to just clarify, would you not include my parents' home value or any retirement funds like a 401k or 403b through the employer?
That is correct. Do not include them. Not on the FAFSA form, but if the college requires the CSS profile, it may need to be reported.
Okay. Joe, and you answered this question for me last year during our Money for College night. And I think it's really important, especially for the successful students here in St. Clair County that Stephen, Claire, and Seth will work with, that, you know, we have tremendous support for our community with scholarships and all this, and then could qualify and help. You know, my family's going to contribute so much. I have a bunch of scholarships, and I can afford the cost of tuition. But there's scholarships coming from state universities and colleges, but I didn't fill out the FAFSA. Does that put me in a certain situation? Am I still eligible for that aid from certain universities?
Okay, so it's going to depend. So in this case, did we fill out the FAFSA or did we not, Nick?
Did not.
Did not. So so we know that there are several colleges and universities that will give scholarships based on a student's grade point average and perhaps the SAT test, right? Now, SAT is going to be a little bit different this year because not all colleges and universities are requiring the students to take them. But let's say that they are doing SAT optional, whether you have the score or not. But you could go to, let's say, OU's website, and it will say if you have a grade point average of X, you're eligible for the presidential scholarship. And it tells you what the dollar amount is, okay? It might have, some might say, if they're still looking at the SAT, they may say grade point average and SAT requirement. So some of those are gonna be a flat dollar amount. Some might be good for all 4 years. You know, some might be just for that academic year. You need to pay attention to it. But by all means, students can get institutional scholarships and some donor scholarships without filling out the FAFSA form. But here again, why not open that pool and apply for as much money as you possibly can and simply fill it out?
Okay.
Right? We're getting a lot more programs. It's giving some of us a lot more gray hair. Everybody wants their dollar to be last dollar, right? So they're saying you have to apply for money that you're eligible for before I will consider you for my scholarship.
And that's what I get a lot of questions from students and families are, you know, like you said, that last dollar scholarships. They're looking to see what you did before that. And a lot of that's associated with the FAFSA, as much as Stephen, Claire, and yourself and Seth have talked about tonight, all leads back to completing this application.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks so much, Joe. I'm going to move on to the next steps for the students and families. What we're going to look at now is how you return to your specific districts and where to go from here. So as I mentioned a few times, Seth, Claire, and Stephen are 3 of the 5 college advisors that we have here in St. Clair County. We also have Shayla Moore at Yale High School and Brandon Wardlow that's at Port Huron High. So if right away, if you have some questions about the FSAID or anything to clarify based on this recording, you can go to them tomorrow and start asking questions on how to get this application started and how to get it completed. Once again, I mentioned our guidance counselors. They're extremely strong in filling out this application, and a lot of the knowledge that was shared today, they know as well, and they can assist you on one-on-one advising to help get this completed this fall. For the seniors that are on this webinar, and I actually saw the list today, there's actually a lot of seniors that joined us from last week at the college applications and essay webinar. That is so great to see that you're working right through the Fall Essentials checklist that BWCAN created for you. And this is stop number 2. So last week you looked at college applications and how to get your list down to pursue your academic pursuits after graduation. And this is stop 2 about getting started with the application. Now step 3 is coming up October 21st with our next webinar, which is for scholarships and paying for college. That's going to take not only this information, but talk about how to increase your success rate of getting scholarship, what scholarships are out there, and then what other things are past the FAFSA and scholarships that'll help make college affordable for you. That'll be the 3rd part of our 4-part series, and then we'll wrap up in November with our career exploration, which is not only important for the seniors on this webinar, but also for the underclassmen as you're just starting to tie your major, your certificate, or your credential to where you're going to attend, and you're going to put this all together by November before Thanksgiving. If you'd like to review the information on tonight's webinar, because there was so much great information from Joe and then from our college advisors, we're going to have a recording up as we did from last week. So we'll be posting this on the new BWCAN website. And also there's other resources as well and information that'll help guide you through your career and college planning. If you missed last week's college applications webinar, once again, there is a recording for that, and this will be posted tomorrow. And one more great resource that BWCAN started this year is the Blue Water College Access Network monthly newsletter that goes out with resources, information, and updates from not only us, but also all of our community partners, such as SC4, the Community Foundation, and our state organizations. There's a portion on the website for you to simply put in an email address, and you'll receive this monthly. And these are real-time updates. A lot of our presenters alluded to today, and we did last week as well. The college access topic right now is a fluid situation as everybody's working through this pandemic and a lot of the changes through the admissions and college affordability process. So this will be a great resource for you monthly on all the updates that are happening across the state and also across the nation, also here in St. Clair County. Well, without further ado, we are going to move to the Community Foundation Scholarship. Once again, one St. Clair County 11th and 12th grade student that was in attendance tonight will be awarded a $500 scholarship for investing your time this evening to learn more about college access. So I have usually I have a big check and I do this in person, but this year I just have the trusty jar right here with all the names of the attendees. So let me reach in here, shuffle it up a little bit. All right, and our winner this evening for the Community Foundation Scholarship is Robert Davis, 12th grader from Port Huron Northern High School. Congratulations, Robert. We will be sending you the informations and the forms to your residents, and you can complete those and send those back to us. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this evening's webinar. A special thank you to our guests, Joe Gassar, Claire Nowinski, Stephen Curtis, and Seth Cunningham. You guys have a safe evening, and we'll see you on October 21st at our scholarships webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good night.